Well, hello, everybody. Welcome back again. Today we have with us Debbie Simmons. She's a faith-filled leader, international speaker, and best-selling author of The Heart of Legacy. She's also the founder of Anchor Point. She empowers families through Christ-centered services. Through her latest venture, she equips leaders to walk in purpose, trust God deeply, and build legacies that glorify Him. Welcome, Debbie. How are you today?
Hi, I'm great.
Good. I mean, I'm super excited to have you here because when I always say parents, when people go into parenting, they should get an award automatically for being a saint. And you're more than a saint. You actually have nine adopted children. So
Mhm.
you definitely get the sainthood award. There's no doubt about that. But talk to us a little bit. I mean, I'm just super excited to have you here because wow. I mean, I'm in awe of the fact that you adopted nine children. First of all, that you have nine children. I have three, and that was more than I could handle almost. So, talk about your journey into how you adopted nine children.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I will tell you, it's a little bit of a ride, so buckle your seatbelt, but we'll have some fun hearing some of the wild tales that I have. But I ended up really wanting. It's so funny. I wanted to be like a young grandma, and so I was like, "Let's get married. Let's have children early." And I had this whole idea of what this parenting thing kind of looked like, and my journey included infertility for many, many years, ultimately getting pregnant with quads and my boys dying in my arms. And uh, that that journey itself, I had to learn a couple of things to figure out how to survive that. And some of the things that I learned is that when we're facing difficult situations, that a lot of times we like to ask the question, why? Why me? Why this? Why? And God just really kind of worked on my heart during that time of losing the boys to say, I need you to like lay down your why, to give me your why. And, that's very frustrating to have to give up my question because I'm like, if I just had the answer, it would be great. And God's like, no, just give me the question. And what I figured out was, if anybody would have answered that question for me, even now to this day, if anybody would try and give me the answer to that question, then it does not satisfy me. It doesn't bring my boys back. It doesn't take away my pain. It just will never satisfy. So it's what I call a stuck question because I can never get resolution to it that will ever bring me peace, joy, happiness, all those good things that we're kind of looking for, right? So I realized I had to lay that down. And then I had to learn to ask the question, how do I survive? And that is how I began to walk through my journey. And that was literally take your next best step. God met me there. Take the next best step. God met me there. And take my next best step. And this became just a lifelong journey for me. And then as I began to heal, something really cool happened. I changed the question and it became not how do I survive, but how do I thrive? And
Right.
in that place, that is what actually started us. I didn't want to be the same person 30 years, after my boys had died and still stuck with those same feelings and not having joy and not being able to live my life to the fullest. And I just was real committed to figure out how to thrive. And so I worked really hard at it. And as I did, God opened many doors and, to work with families who've lost children, do all these kind of things. But it led to the adoption. It led to starting the ministry. It led to the book, The Heart of Legacy. And the adoption piece was we actually sat around several years after losing the boys and said, okay, should we try again? And we had this idea to think about adopting. And we ended up adopting three different times over the years. And we did a sibling group of five out of CPS custody, then a sibling group of three about 7 years later. I mean, sorry, a sibling group of two, 3 years later, and then another sibling group of two about 2.5 years after that. And so we just kept adding them. And the interesting thing with my children is they all come from abuse and neglect backgrounds and have experienced things that children should never have to experience, and often at the hands of the people that should have loved them. They either let that happen or they did those things. And so my children have taught me a lot about what resilience looks like and the ability to figure their way forward when their life has been so dysfunctional. And so there's two sides, how I have to grow as a mom in that situation to be the mom that these children need, and then how I've watched my children stretch and grow through the years to learn to be able to function as adults as they've moved into adulthood. So that's kind of how we landed there. So from that
That is,
perspective.
yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. Well, that makes sense, and it makes
Mhm.
total sense. And I'm looking at you now and going, okay, so when you were told to lay down this question of why,
Yeah.
I feel like now you have your why. Like what you know, it's like what it led you to do and what it led you to learn and how many people you've helped because of it. But did you say you were pregnant with quads
Yes. With the four boys. Yeah.
and you lost all of them at
Yeah. They were born at 26 weeks. Yeah.
mm,
And it was a long time ago. So like today, if they would have been born, medical technology has wonderful, and they would have survived. Matter of fact, I have a grandbaby that was born at 23 weeks that has survived and is doing really good. But it just didn't exist 30 plus years ago. And
no.
so, that's part of the journey. But yes, I do, you can look back now, in hindsight's 2020, and you can kind of see some of those whys kind of coming to fruition. But you think about it, if you're in the hospital room and somebody says, well, oh, you're going to start this great ministry and you're going to adopt all these children, I'll be like, that doesn't satisfy me.
No,
Yeah.
that's what I'm saying. It's like you have to look back. And I mean, I do the same
Yeah.
thing. I look back and go, when I was a kid and all this stuff was happening, I was like, why me? Why me? But then as I have someone call me this morning, a lady called me and she's like, oh my gosh, I just needed a little dose of Tammy and your wisdom. And
Yeah.
I was like, that's why me,
Yeah.
because had I not had those experiences, I wouldn't have been able to have the compassion for her situation that I have now. So I know my why, little bits and pieces at a time. But yeah, when you're in the throes of it, all you want to know is why.
Yeah.
That's
And
that's
it
it.
and it and it is such a stuck question. I mean, it will cause us to spiral the wrong way, and we can't figure out how to get out of that because nothing satisfies at that moment.
No,
It's
absolutely.
powerful to be able to lay it down. And I really did. I wasn't, and I like to tell people, I'm not like some super mature person. I just trusted God with the why. And this next best step concept is, something that allows movement. I mean, early in the early days, my next best step looked like, okay, I'm going to take the covers off of my head. I'm going to get out of the bed and I'm going to brush my teeth for 5 minutes, and then I'm getting back in the bed. And that is my win, and
Hmm.
that's okay, right? And then other days I could do more things. And so I think we have to have a lot of grace with ourselves. We're looking at my 30-year journey and going, oh, she's doing so great. I'm going, well, it had quite a ride in there. So people that are in challenging situations, each small step is a step in the right direction. And so we want to encourage them, like you said, like you gave that lady courage, a little bit of wisdom and courage to do the next thing. Those are big, huge things, even though they seem small.
Right. And you're right, because it's when you're starting any kind of healing, recovery, anything from anything traumatic or big,
Hmm.
it is some days it's just, I'm going to get out of bed.
Yeah.
I mean, I know my friend, she lost a good friend of mine, lost her husband. And she said for weeks, it was just like, I'm going to get out of bed. And then it was, I'm going to actually feed my daughter because instead of her having to fend for herself, because
Yeah.
and you do have to celebrate that because
Hmm.
everybody's different. So there's no
Yeah.
timeline on grief. There's no timeline on getting over something. You're going to do it as you can handle it and as you can see fit. But it's,
Hmm.
yeah, definitely celebrate those small wins. So I want to ask you, because having 9 children from the foster system, I mean, basic adopting 9 children, they obviously, if it was a group of 5, there were various ages. So they had been through their own traumas. Where did you get the the knowledge and the wisdom to be able to help them through their adversity, because they had to have gone through a lot?
Sure. Well, one is I love children. And so, like I told you, I wanted to be that young grandma, and I've always loved dealing with children. So, I myself have just self educated on a lot of things very early on. I also was a children's pastor. And so, I dealt with children a ton. And some of it, some of us are blessed that it just comes natural
Mm-hmm.
to do these things. And so for me, that's part of it. But I will tell you, well, our first sibling group of five, they were all brothers and sisters. They were 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. And it was a basketball team at that time. Now I'm
Yeah.
promoted to a baseball team, but they we were super blessed that four of the five were in a wonderful uh, foster home where that lady had had hundreds of kids go through her home. And
Mm.
she really specialized on helping these kiddos really heal a lot of things. And so they were so ready to be part of our home. The other child was in a therapeutic home, which was extremely rigid. And so you have this thing where I've got her coming back into the family and then all of them trying to be part of our family. And it was just very chaotic for this one child. It was very hard. And she had more trauma issues that we had to deal with. But that's partly because she didn't have a wonderful foster
Right.
experience that allowed her to begin to process some of this stuff. So I would say, hey, that you adopt a sibling group. One thing you can see is if they can relate with each other, and they related with each other. But they trained us up very quickly on things that we maybe weren't very good at, and so systems and procedures and like high structure, high nurture, and learning to deal with them. But the thing that we had to learn and they gave us training in, and I would tell you I wasn't exposed to this till my third adoption, and that is trust-based relational intervention, the work of Dr. Karen Purvis out of Texas Christian University. I am a trained practitioner in that and lead therapeutic camps through our ministry and stuff that we do. But that opened my eyes as to how trauma affects the brain, but it also affects how these kids operate. And when I was first exposed to that, I was like, oh, this was the missing piece.
Mm-hmm.
Because when we parent, we typically parent out of either what we experienced that we saw that we liked or the opposite of it because we didn't like it. And so those are the things because when you get children, you don't get instruction manuals. Okay. They
Right.
are the instruction manuals. Okay. And they teach us. And so I had to learn very quickly for me that my own issues as an adult, my kid issues that I brought into my adulthood, they get lit up by children very easily, right? Children
Mm-hmm.
are like, they're like masters at, and they go, oh, got you. And they don't even know what they're hitting, but they hit some wounded spot in me. And then I'm in, I've what we call blown my lid. I'm in my amygdala. And now I'm acting out of emotion versus logical as a parent. And so if I don't catch that, then I'm going to blow up. And then when I blow up, it's going to cause a kid to blow up. And then we're going to all blow up. And then it's going to be this tornado that we have to land. Right. And so I had to learn very quickly that there was a lot of self reflection and work that I needed to do on me so that I could be the parent they needed me to be and be fully present when they were losing it. Because my kids had lots of maladaptive behaviors that they didn't know how to deal with. These were survival mechanisms for them, which we don't want to take away unless we give them something that they can use to substitute for it, right? So
Right.
use your
Yeah.
word. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, their brains are used to doing what they're doing and it feels safe to them, even though it's not, it's what made them
Yes.
feel safe. So you can't just all of a sudden change that and then not give them a replacement to make them feel safe,
Right.
which makes total sense. And I love that you said that about the self-reflection because I think it's so important. And I tell people all the time, none of us are perfect parents. None of us, there's just no such thing. We're human, But
Hmm.
when you start to realize that what happened to you as a child did follow you in, and that your children are literally triggering you like big time, and you can start to manage that, it does make a huge difference. Huge. Same thing with teachers.
Yeah.
And same thing with bosses in a big corporation.
Oh,
We're kind of
yeah.
in this trauma reactive world, and that's why I think it's so important that everybody be trauma informed in some way, shape, or form,
Hmm.
because it's like we're all running this autopilot based on our subconscious beliefs from childhood. So you're not even dealing with the person standing in front of you, you're dealing with their 6 or 7 or 8 year old self.
Yeah.
But give me a couple examples of, not necessarily when your kids triggered you, but go back to what you said your specialty is or your training was in, and
Hmm.
talk a little bit more about that. That's probably interesting for the people listening.
Yes. Okay. So one really cool thing is when we talk about learning like that we're triggered. Okay. When I train families, I actually teach them that it's like you have entered into your shark waters. Okay. So it's like Jaws and it's like dun, 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 dun. And you start. So most of us, if we can figure out how to name it, we can tame it. So if we are starting to lose it and we can go, oh, that's my shark waters, then it breaks the cycle of me completely flipping out. Okay. So it's extremely powerful. So what I've taught most adults over the years is, hey, listen, think about the last time that you were in a situation that was very, you felt yourself kind of fixing to lose it, or you did lose it. Okay. Then think about what was happening in your body right before you lost it. Okay. And most of us have a spot in our body that gets what I call lit up. Okay. For me, it happens to be in my chest right here. I can feel it. It's just like heavy pressure and it like locks down and I can tell exactly when it happens. And I go, oh, I'm fixing to lose it. Some people feel it in their gut. Some people feel it in their shoulders, but we all kind of feel it somewhere. And if we can learn to be very attuned to when that we start to feel that feeling come on, then that is when we know that we have entered the shark waters. Okay. And as soon as we start to feel it, we're still in our prefrontal cortex. So we have a chance of stopping it. Okay. And that's why you name it. Oh, that's my shark waters. Right. Because when you say it, then it kind of keeps you in your prefrontal cortex instead of letting your brain just kind of blow its top. And then we're down here in the amygdala where there's not any rational thinking at that point. Right.
Exactly. And you
Yeah.
can, for the people out there listening, you can name it whatever you want.
Yeah.
You can name it whatever you want. I'm just trying to think of like fun names. It doesn't have to be shark waters. But I encourage people to do a little practice right now. I mean, when this is over, sit down and
Yes.
think of something. Try to pull up a memory of something, because I know exactly where mine is. Mine is my lower back and into my hips, and it goes like almost into my buttocks,
Yeah. Yeah.
like ugh, and it's and people like, and it's so funny because I always go, well, if I feel it there, it's okay. I'm not making a face. And my kids will be like, oh, you're still making a face. Don't,
Yeah.
but it's,
That's so funny. Yeah.
and I never really thought about giving it a name, but I know when I feel that feeling, I'm like, okay, that is my freeze and reset and take a deep breath,
Yeah.
or else I'm going to start to feel worse. Like that's how I know.
Yeah, yeah. And the reason we call it the shark waters is when we're doing it in training, I actually have them watch this video of this beautiful scenery out on like some rocky ledge at a beach, and you're walking down the trail. And the first time you walk down it, it's got this nice, easy music, and you go, oh, this is where I want to go for a vacation. This is wonderful. We replay it with the Jaws theme and everything. And so it's like dun dun dun
Dun,
dun
dun, dun,
dun
dun,
dun.
dun, dun.
And that's why we call it shark waters, because it's like by the time you get down to the beach, it's like, oh my God, we're fixing to get attacked. And that's exactly how we feel. And so whatever name you call it, it just gives you the opportunity to break. And that's what you want. You want something to stop your roller coaster from, just going down the hill and plowing everybody out. Because when mom loses it, or when CEO Debbie loses it, it's not pretty. And I guarantee you that the times that I have, and my kids have lost it, and we've this tornado that we got to land, everybody bears the scars of that.
Hmm.
Uh, and it's not the other thing I would walk away and go with is, some of us might feel a lot of guilt and shame because we fall in those traps sometimes. What I want to encourage everybody too is that our goal as parents is, like you said, nobody's perfect. Okay. And if we could actually get this picture that is actually more valuable for our children for us to lose it occasionally, and to come back and to reconcile and bring the relationship back full circle. So, when we lose it or when our kids lose it, our sympathetic nervous system kicks in. Okay. And then all the hormones and all of the stuff that go along with that get excited. And a lot of times in trauma, everything stops right there. So my kids were abused or whatever, and it stops right there. There's no parasympathetic piece that comes back in to bring those kids back into a stable range. And so the reason they have maladaptive behaviors is because they never got this circle finished. So actually losing it and then coming back and going, mom really didn't mean to yell then. I really kind of got messed up, and figuring out how you both can get back on track and moving forward together. That is how resilience is built. And
Yes.
so it's actually extremely powerful that we don't get it right all the time. So if you're a person like me that doesn't get it right, you're doing great, and I think I have a study that shows about 30% of the time, if we get it right, then our kids are going to be okay. And that is such a great relief for us as parents to know, oh my gosh, I don't have to have it all together all the
Yeah.
time. So
And it makes total sense though, especially for these children that are stuck in that fight and flight. If you lose it, they're back in fight, or flight or whatever it is, or freeze, whatever it is, they're stuck there. And then, like you said, when you come back around and you give them that love and you make them feel safe all over again, it's 100% shift. I can only imagine, like I picture things like when I was a kid, like what I wouldn't have done after that incidental beating kind of thing, where if I'm going to just come back and be like, I'm so sorry, like that was not cool, like I lost it, I still love you, blah blah blah. But it's, you don't, sometimes you just don't get that, so it is very important. So what are your tips, like what would you, okay, so you freeze, you notice it, you name it, that's my shark waters. Do you
mhm.
have a next step? Like for me, it's I count to like 4 or 5 no matter what before I react to anything now. That's just my thing.
Yeah, well, definitely we would say at least count to three. If you lose your brain and you're down here, this response is going to be bad. If you get the prefrontal cortex re-engaged, then you got a lot better shot. So that's like, people tell you, write your email, but don't send it. And then
Yes.
look at it a little later, then send it. It's always better. So our second thing is always the best thing. But what we can easily do if we're dealing with children, then what we can easily do is put mom in a timeout. Okay. And that's your counting to five or whatever. But what do I need to do to make sure my kid is safe? And if I can just get away from them for just a few minutes, just to breathe. And it's not like I'm not going back to re-engage. So just to breathe and to refocus, say a prayer, count to 10, whatever you do. And then once you do that, you're going to be in such a better place that you can step back in and re-engage. Okay. That is great. But the other thing I would suggest is once all this is over, okay, you have got to be committed to go figure out what got you triggered.
Yes.
And so I can remember, this is so funny. I can remember when I'm losing it sometimes. And I had some ladies that prayed for me on a regular basis, and I would go and we'd do some work on some of my history stuff. And I would text them while I'm like losing it. And I'm like, could you sign me up for the prayer thing so I can be a good mom because I'm losing it? And then I'm like, okay, put that down. Now I'm back in the game, but I'm just like, I got to get that on the schedule because I'm not going to be a good mom if I don't. And so, it's okay. But we personally need safe people in our lives that we can tell our stories to, that
Mhm.
will still look in our eyes and see our preciousness and tell us, okay, you can do this. You are valuable. You are loved. You can do this. And let me walk through my healing, because I cannot, in any form or fashion, take children on a journey of healing that I myself have not been on. And so, I personally think God gave me 9 children because I had a lot of work to do. So that's what I've been doing on me, because I really feel like I have had to do a lot more growing than they have had to do so that I could be the parent that they needed me to be. And that's taken a lot of work, right? So,
Well, and there's no better healing for your children than to watch you heal. Like you
mhm,
said, you're teaching them resilience, you're teaching them emotional intelligence, you're teaching them all of the skills that so many children just don't get. So many kids just are just, get away, get away, get away. Mom's irritated, get away. And there's no resolution, there's no talking through, there's no closure to anything. And then that's why kids spend their lives walking on eggshells,
yeah. hmm
because they know that they don't foresee the safety in the future.
Right. Yeah. And that's very true. When we deal with kids that come to our therapeutic camps, I mean, that is, they have either created environments where everybody's walking on eggshells, or they are trying to figure, if they've come from the abusing and neglect situation, they are trying to figure their way, like you said. And so it's like, hey, what do I have to do, because I know he's been drinking and I know he potentially is going to do something bad to me. So, how do I avoid that? Right. And that's the maladaptive ways that they've learned to survive.
Right.
Uh, and then when they get in my home where we know it's safe, right? They still do all those maladaptive things. And I'm like, that's not working. We got to figure out how to. And so we've got to help them go on that journey of, let's change that out for this. Maybe instead of tearing up my kitchen, maybe you could just use your words and ask me versus throwing a chair, or whatever it is. And I'm like, because if you use your words, then I'm going to do my very best to meet that. And so I
Right.
think it's very important for us to understand that when we do ask kids to give up maladaptive behaviors, and we ask them to use their words and stuff like that, it is very, very important that I do everything I can to meet that need. And
Yes.
sometimes we think that that need is maybe just a want. But when I am trying to build the trust bucket up, uh,
Mm-hmm.
it's still very, very important. And so I'm going to do it and I'm going to exceed it. So, like, an example of that is like a kid who maybe steals pencils at school or something like that, from the teacher or whatever, instead of asking, they just take them. Then, when that's found out, we're not going to berate the kid, because the kid has learned to survive this way. We're going to give the pencils back and talk about that that's not a good way to get pencils, and that if you need pencils, you should ask. And so we're going to redo it the right way, because we want to wire the brain with the last thing that we do. Let that kid ask for the pencil. Can I have a pencil? And if I have the best situation, that teacher's going to give him 2 or 3 pencils.
Right.
Because, buddy, when you use your words, I'm going to try and more than meet your needs. So he wanted one, right? And so 2 or 3, we're gonna work on this together. And it's so powerful. I mean, I've had situations where my kids had things at school like that happen, and I've hauled them back up there, and I'm like, okay, teacher, we're doing a redo. Because the teacher's like, well, what's that? And I'm like, oh, goodness, we're definitely doing the redo, because we're wiring both of your brains. And I'm like, we're doing this. And she's like, well, we don't have to do that. And I'm like, no, 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 you don't understand. It's imperative that we do this. And so then I get to teach her, but she just didn't understand. And she
Right.
would have left it in that. And I'm going, no, if this is the last thing you leave wired in this kid's brain, then the next time the situation comes up, this will be the first thing he thinks,
Yeah.
is to do it the same bad way. And I said, we have to rewire the brain. And you can do, and most of us don't realize that it takes about 100 times for us to rewire the brain. But we get massive gains in rewiring the brain if a kid is laughing and having fun, meaning
Yeah.
they feel safe. And if they
Yes.
feel safe, we can rewire in about 14 tries. So
Hmm.
I had 9 children. I'm going, I don't have time to do 100 times, So the therapeutic camps that we do, we take phrases like focus and finish, listen and obey, and things like that. And we build all the camp on that. So the whole day is listen and obey. So you might do 50 activities that cause you to listen and obey that day. So you're getting your repetition in, and that's why
Mm.
we see radical changes in these kids that are struggling in like 2 days of our therapeutic camps.
Wow.
Yeah.
And that's your business is the therapeutic camps?
Yeah, we do. That's part of what we do at Anchor Point is we work with families that have kiddos that are struggling, and we run a therapeutic camp in the summer and bring the parents in, and we bring the kiddos in, and it's a week-long intensive. It's about a year and a half to 2 years of kind of therapy in a situation, and I'm telling you, we see radical changes in the kids. We train the parents up. And then we substitute them in as the buddies so I can watch them work with their kids. And then we do some stuff after camp in their homes because it's like we're resetting everything in that family system for success. And the parents, like, oh, now I understand.
Yeah.
They're not
Yeah.
like attacking me. It's my shark waters going off, right? And now I know
Right.
that I know how to deal with that. And now we're all on a system. So, key phrases like listen and obey, focus and finish with respect, use your words. These are all things that my kids now have engraved, it's in their head. So now I can incorporate these in how I lead these children. And we just see phenomenal changes in understanding in the parents and in the kids.
Wow. Where is your camp? What state are you in?
We're in Houston, Texas.
Okay. And you do camps all year round?
No, we just do them in the summer, and we do have people that come and fly in, but I tell people it's like a staycation.
Yeah.
It's a vacation Bible school on kind of steroids if you've ever been in that environment, and then Breakdown Central because life is not always about having it all together. It's how we make our way through it, right? And so if you lose it, then we get the opportunity to walk you through how you can successfully walk through it. And next time when you're facing that, how you can use different things to get your needs met.
Perfect. Absolutely perfect. So I want to kind of jump topics here because you reminded me that we wanted to talk quite a bit more about not just surviving, but actually thriving.
Mhm.
Can you talk a little bit about that to the audience and just, like what you did? You had a horrific loss and you talked a little bit about your mindset and you knew you wanted to be the best, what all that good stuff. But how do you start to turn that from just surviving to thriving? Or how do you know if you're just surviving and not thriving?
Well, I would say, as far as how do I know if I'm just surviving? Okay. For me, what kind of stuck out to me was I knew I was making it because when tragedy happens or a big challenge comes, it's like the world keeps going. And I'm like, hey, everybody, everything stopped for me. Why aren't you stopped? And why is it still going? And so, you talked about grace, and, I tell people after a big loss or big challenge is that you have a year of grief and mourning that you kind of do because you got to go through all the seasons of the calendar year. So, like right after we lost the boys, Mother's Day came around.
Right.
Well, that was a little, that wasn't so much fun. Then Father's Day, then when they were going to be born, and then Christmas, and then this, and then that. And then the second time around gets a little bit easier because it's not so raw, right? And I'm learning to tell my story and have safe people that are helping me process and stuff like that. So, but I knew that here I was in my late 20s, and I'm going, I had this big thing happen, but I still want to live.
Mm.
I want to experience life to the fullest. And I'm going, I I don't want to be stuck with these emotions, like all the like sobbing and all this stuff. And I'm like, how do I get through that? And so having safe people that I told my story to over and over and over again until it became easier every time, right? And I've told it so many times in 30 years, I can tell it easily now. But I'm always amazed at how when people hear the story, they they can resonate with that, right? Because pain is pain. And they go,
Hmm.
oh, oh, let me, and so the reason I tell my story now is because I go, I want you to go on the journey with me. I want you to figure out how to live again. I want you to thrive. And so that's the reason I do the things is like, hey, that's why we wrote the book and why we did these things. But what I found is at some point, I just had the opportunity. I had been healing and I just had the opportunity to say, okay, what's next? Is this it? Or is there more? Right. And so that's the question because I think you get to choose. You get to choose whether you figure out how to survive. And I know women who lost children about the same time I did, and they are bubbling messes. And I've just have just kind of gone through life, and their life is like gray. It's
Right.
like, you know, and I'm like, no, I want to laugh again. I want to cry again. I want to love again. And so I think everybody in their journey, at some point, you need people that challenge you and just, are you willing to say, no, I want to thrive? What does it take? What does it take to thrive? What does that looking like? And for me, God was really gracious. I just kept praying that to God. How do I thrive? How do I thrive? And he would put an opportunity to do these grief groups. And I'm like, I don't know what that is, but okay, I'll try it. And so I tried it. And then, like, all these women that lost children came into my life. And I'm like, sure. And it was a very unique point at that stage because I didn't have children. And so the question they always had was, well, how can you even smile? And I'm like, well, here's how we go on this journey, right? So he
Right.
kept giving opportunities like that. And the more I would commit to do those things and walk through those things, and the bigger the opportunities became. And, and then eventually starting a ministry, I'm like, are you kidding me? That's like really huge. And that requires, doing these things and walking away from my engineering job and all this type of things. But I would say you just know when you're ready. And if you've got people in your life that are loving you and encouraging you, then you'll know. And it's like, I just want to thrive. I want to live.
Hmm.
And so I don't think it happens at the same time speed for everyone.
Oh, no.
But so if you land in, I mean, it's interesting now. So, like as a CEO now, these questions still apply. So, in the middle, right after COVID, I had a situation with an employee that we ultimately had to let go. And about 7 months, 8 months later, I got a nice lawsuit. Okay. And I remember getting the lawsuit, and what's the first thing I did? Why am I getting this lawsuit? And why this? And why that? Da, 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 da. And I realized, okay, that's not going to be helpful. That's not taking
Right.
me. I need to lay that down. So I did that pretty quickly. And then my next question became, okay, how do I survive this? How do I not have this take the whole ministry out? What do I need to do? And I just breathed. And the next thing that kind of came to mind was maybe you ought to call the attorney. That's probably a pretty good idea on a lawsuit. So I called the attorney. And then, as we started to make our way through it, I was like, okay, how can we thrive? Because I could choose to become very bitter over this, or I can
Right.
choose to be better, right? And that whole sequence for that question series wasn't that long of a sequence. It actually took me about a year and a half to get that lawsuit thing taken care of, and God protected us the whole time. But I mean, as a leader, I get to choose how I lead, and everyone is watching. All of my staff, my children, everyone is watching how I go through that difficult situation. And so for me, I go, I'm teaching too at the same time. My life is teaching. How do you deal with these difficult things? And I want to teach well so that I leave a wonderful legacy when I'm gone. And you have to be intentional now when you do it.
Yep. And 2 points I took from that too, and just comments I want to make because that's Perfect response to that question. But one is, I remember the day that I kept hearing this one saying, you got to pretend, you got to look at life as happening for you, not to you. And that's one of those where I take into those difficult conversations and those difficult situations, as it's like, like you said, what am I going to do with this to better, to come out stronger than I went in? Like, we're going to deal with it. I mean, if you're standing here today, you're surviving. You've made it. You're
Yeah.
survived. I mean, you're here. But there is a huge difference between surviving and thriving. And I think that's, again, if you're listening to this and you got that feeling in your stomach somewhere, or you got it in your chest, or your jaws clenched, then you want to thrive. Then you probably, you want it. And you do have to make the choice that you're going to commit. And I think the biggest thing is community, like you said.
Hmm.
Tell your story, join groups. There's so many resources. They didn't have all these resources when I was a kid.
Yeah.
They didn't have Alateen. Well, they did have Alateen, but it wasn't readily available. You couldn't jump on an Al-Anon meeting 300 times a week anywhere in the world and get that group support and everything.
Hmm.
So it's just deciding you want to come out stronger on every single situation. And you will. Absolutely. Well,
Hmm.
this has been super fun. I could talk to you forever. But so if people want to work with you, so you talked about your camps and everything. If they want to work with you, find you, talk to you, what is the absolute best place to find you?
Yeah, so there's actually two places. So it's the first one is anchorpoint.us. That's the ministry that I started. That has information about camp, or if they wanted to join the 911 prayer text thing where they could pray for people in the ministry, they could do stuff like that. And all the social media handles are there for that. And then on me personally, it's DebbieSimmons.com. And there they can learn about coaching and about the Heart of Legacy book and different speaking things that I'm doing and podcasts and all that stuff. And it's got all the wonderful social media handles too. So those are two places that they can look.
Okay, and I will put all your links in the show notes and everything so people can find them too. And don't forget to send me a link to your book.
Yeah, I will.
Yeah, no, that I will definitely put that in there. So you're not off the hook yet. I have one more question. So if
Yeah.
you had to leave the listeners, well, first of all, thank you for coming, Debbie. This was
Mhm.
very enlightening. And I'm still in awe of the fact that you adopted 9 children. And they're all grown now, right? They're all grown and out doing their thing. And
Yeah, my youngest is 20. He's still in the house, but we're working on that. So,
hey, takes time. My 21-year-old just left and my 30-year-old still home. So I think
oh, I'm on to grandbabies, though. I'm big into grandbabies. I'm like, where are the grandbabies? Bring them over.
there you go. So, if you had to leave the audience with words of wisdom, piece of advice, or one final thought, what would it be?
Mhm. I would say that no matter the situation that you're facing, that you, my friend, are valuable, you're deeply loved, and the sun will come out tomorrow. Just hang on and keep taking the next best step.
Perfectly said. Well, guys, you heard it from Debbie Simmons, and I couldn't have said it any better myself. Just keep going one step at a time, one day at a time, sometimes 1 second at a time, but just keep going because you, as she said, are so valuable, so worth it, and so loved. So thank you, and we will see you all next week.